I'm the personal assistant for a very wealthy investor. For the most part, he's a great boss. In the 3 years I've worked for him, I've never really been given any reason to complain. But what I've just experienced still has me thinking about quitting. My employer owns a large property in the northern mountains of Vermont. It's peaceful there. Usually, acres of land and trees, the kind of place where the world goes silent under the weight of winter. He bought it for the privacy. No neighbors, no tourists, no traffic, nothing but snow and forest for miles. In the warmer months, it feels almost surreal. During the colder months, though, the place gets completely snowed in. No signal, no visitors, no way in or out unless you're willing to hike through miles of ice and snow-covered forest. Usually we just let it be, but this year my boss decided to hire a caretaker to come stay at the property through the winter. Someone who could keep the pipes from freezing, monitor the generator, and make sure the house didn't fall apart in the time no one would be there. I ended up getting Dominic, an old friend from college, to agree to do it. Yesterday, though, Dominic missed his weekly check-in. Because the property has no cell service, we relied on an old shortwave radio system to stay in touch. The mansion had its own base unit wired into the generator room, and I carried a matching receiver in my truck. The trick was that the radios could only make contact when I drove into the nearest town, about 25 miles out. Anywhere else, and the mountains killed the transmission instantly. Every Wednesday, I'd park beside the little grocery store, set my radio on the dash, and wait for Dominic's voice to crackle through the static. But this week, the frequency stayed dead. No tone, no interference, no voice, just silence. And Dominic wasn't the type to miss a check-in. After a full day with no response, I knew something was wrong enough that I had no choice but to head up the mountain myself, even if the whole situation had the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The storm was so heavy that the road leading up to the property was barely recognizable. I had to abandon my car half a mile away and walk the rest of the distance through knee-deep drifts that swallowed the landscape in white. By the time I reached the towering mansion's front steps, I was half frozen, breath burning in my lungs, and already filled with a creeping sense of dread. The Winter Vale property is remote in a way that feels suffocating, like the land itself prefers solitude. The mansion sits alone on a vast snowy hill surrounded by thick pine forest. It has a completely different vibe during spring and summer when all the workers are present. But this was different. In the dead of winter, without a single footprint or tire track for miles, the mansion didn't just feel empty, it felt heavy. Like if you stayed too long, the winter would swallow you whole. Inside the house, the air was sharp with cold. A thin layer of frost clung to the windows, and the wooden floorboards creaked under my boots, like they hadn't felt movement in days. "Dom," I called, my voice echoing through the entry hall, but the only answer was the wind pushing against the walls. Nothing was disturbed, nothing broken, just an isolating stillness that felt uneasy. Making my way up the towering spiral staircase, I crept into the bedroom Dom had been sleeping in. Still no sign of him anywhere, but what I did find was his notebook, lying on the counter as if someone had gently set it down and walked away. The cover was slightly warped with moisture, and the final pages were smudged, as though written in shaking hands. Before I opened it, I searched the rest of the house, hoping to find Dom asleep or sick. I checked every bedroom, every hallway, every bathroom, the attic, the basement, but the mansion was silent. Only when I stepped out the back door did I find something that broke the emptiness. A set of footprints leading away from the porch, cutting a path through the untouched snow. The steps were irregular, some deep and forceful, others light and scattered, like the person walking had been disoriented or barely able to stand. I followed the tracks for several hundred yards before it finally came into view, a mound of snow shaped unmistakably like a body. Dominic was lying there, buried, unbreathing, frozen upright as though he had been desperately trying to continue walking even while succumbing to the cold. There was nothing more I could do for him. He must have frozen to death within just a few hours. I had to drive back into town to inform the authorities, but before leaving, I wanted to take a peek at his notebook to see if there was anything I could glean about why he tried to run away in the middle of a snowstorm. It wasn't until I read it that I learned the full story. And honestly, part of me wishes I hadn't. I could tell you the story, but honestly, I think it's better to let the journal entries speak for themselves. Here are Dominic's own words, exactly as he wrote them.
December 10th. I got here yesterday morning, and at first, everything felt exactly like I expected it to. Quiet, empty, buried in snow. The mansion has this lonely postcard charm to it, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being given a clean slate. The place has no cell service at all, so I'm completely cut off from the outside world. Something about the mountains blocking the signal. The first night went smoothly, aside from some clattering in the kitchen. Old house noises, I figured. Pipes or the wind. But this morning when I walked into the kitchen, I saw a man I had never seen before, standing at the counter, tall, dark-skinned, and wearing a full white chef's outfit. Coat, apron, tall hat. He smiled at me like he'd been expecting me, and said breakfast would be ready soon. He introduced himself as Chef Marlin, speaking in a calm, almost old-fashioned way that felt like a relic of the past. When I asked why no one told me he'd be here, all he said was,
"I've always been here."
And then he made me breakfast. A perfect breakfast. French omelets, fresh bread, coffee brewed strong and dark. I was confused. They specifically told me I'd be taking care of the place alone for the whole winter. But the food was good, and he seemed harmless. Quiet. Polite. Almost fatherly. I told myself I must have been confused when going over the job details with Pedro. December 15th. Over the last few days, Marlin's cooked every meal for me. Elaborate dinners, fresh pastries, roast meats that tasted like they belonged in a 5-star restaurant. Oddly enough, he always made exactly what I was craving without ever needing to ask. We talk sometimes. He never mentions anything personal about himself, but he asks a lot about me, my life, my past, my goals. He hums these low, unfamiliar tunes while he cooks. It's strange, but comforting in a way. The company makes the isolation easier. December 17th. Last night during dinner, right in the middle of a normal conversation, Marlin folded his hands neatly on the table and asked me, in a completely calm voice,
"Have you ever wondered what a man feels in the instant before he dies?
I thought he was joking, but he didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just stared at me with these smooth, polished eyes, like stones pulled out of deep water. Then he glanced down at my plate and said,
Fear changes the flavor.
I didn't sleep that night. Today is my first weekly check-in with Pedro. I hadn't planned on mentioning Marlon, but what he said last night, I can't stop thinking about it. The way he looked at me when he asked that question, the tone of his voice, like he pondered that same thought every night before bed. I'm trying to convince myself I overreacted, that it was a weird joke, or I misread something in his expression. But the thought of sitting here without telling anyone feels unbearable. I don't know what I'm going to say yet, but I can't keep this to myself. December 18th. Okay, I'm genuinely starting to wonder now if the isolation is driving me insane. Yesterday I did my weekly check-in with Pedro. The conversation went something like this.
Hey, Dom. So tell me about your first week. How's everything going so far?
Hey, Pedro. Everything is well. I've gotten settled in without any issues. I feel that I should mention, though, the chef you guys hired is a little weird, and I thought I was supposed to be taking care of this place alone.
Chef? What are you talking about? You are there alone, Dom. Or you should be at least. Is someone else there with you?
My heart dropped. I immediately dropped the receiver and raced upstairs to the kitchen. Marlon was gone. Not even a trace that he was ever there. I searched the entire mansion. Nothing. What the hell? Could I have hallucinated the entire thing? I started questioning my own sanity. I eventually came to the conclusion that Marlon must have been a figment of my imagination, like my brain had developed some kind of defense mechanism to the isolation. I marched back down to the radio receiver and told Pedro there was no one here, that I must have confused reality with a really vivid dream. I didn't want him to think he hired a crazy person. That night, Marlon appeared in my dreams. He was sitting at the dining table, sharpening a long knife, sparks flickering off the blade. He didn't speak, just watched me. When I woke up, there was a thin, clean cut on my forearm. I don't remember doing it. I don't think I did. December 22nd. The storms worsened over the last couple of days. I keep hearing Marlon humming through the halls, even though the kitchen is still empty. Sometimes I catch glimpses of movement in the corners of mirrors, or the far ends of hallways. Just a flash of white before vanishing. I tried the radio, but it's not Wednesday. No signal. No help. I feel like the house is pressing in on me. Like the silence is too thick to breathe through. This morning I saw a figure standing at the tree line while I looked out the window. White coat, tall hat, snow whipping around him, but he didn't move. When I blinked, he vanished. Down in the basement, I found a crate of old newspapers buried amongst some old furniture. The front page of one from the early 80s showed a family who once owned Winter Vale Mansion. The headline read, "Tragedy at Winter Vale Estate. Family found slain, household chef suspected." My heart sank further and further as I kept reading, each paragraph painting a clearer picture of what had happened here decades ago. The chef had murdered the entire family one winter night and disappeared into a storm, much like the one raging outside now. The grainy black and white photo at the bottom of the article showed his face, and the moment I saw it, my breath caught in my throat. It was him. It was Marlon. Since then, the haunting has become unbearable. I hear him whispering through the cracks around my bedroom door. Sometimes I smell blood in rooms I hadn't stepped into all day. Once I saw him standing in the reflection of a hallway mirror, even though the hallway behind me was empty. He didn't just haunt the mansion, he fed on fear itself, the way a starving man savors a meal, and he has been feeding on mine for days. December 23rd. Marlon is outside my bedroom door again, whispering for me to come out, too.
Show me what a man feels in the instant he dies.
I can't stay another night. I'd rather take my chances in the storm than be in the house with him. If anyone finds this, I tried. I don't want to die here.
When I reached the end of the journal, my hands were shaking. The kitchen around me felt colder than before, and the dim light above the stove flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen when I first walked in. A pot simmering gently on the stove, releasing a warm, savory smell into the air. No one had touched that stove in days. Before I could move, a soft humming drifted down the hallway, slow, rhythmic, and unmistakable. The same humming Dominic described. I backed away toward the door. My breath clouded in front of me as the air temperature dropped sharply. I didn't look behind me. I didn't want to see whatever might be standing there. By the time I reached my truck, I dared one last glance at the mansion. A tall figure stood in the kitchen window, lit by the stove's faint orange glow. A white chef's coat, a tall hat, and a thin, sinister smile. I left Winter Vale and haven't returned since.